Thank you, John, and thank you, Colonel Carlin, and Chris Hoshek for letting us put this workshop together. This one here. You know, I was looking over the array of folks here. I see a lot of familiar names, a lot of familiar faces on there. So I want to welcome everyone to this workshop, and of course, once again, I want to say I appreciate the CA Association for providing an opportunity to hear from those of us who are busy developing the future capabilities of joint Army and Marine Corps civil affairs and NATO civil military cooperation. It's been mentioned a few times in the opening remarks, and each of these speakers are the folks who work in the world of concepts, experimentation, and wargaming to develop the doctrine, organizations, training, material, leadership and education, personnel, facilities, and policy solutions that are integrated with similar solutions across within the services, across the joint force, and with our interorganizational partners to ultimately meet our nation's goals and objectives across the competition continuum. And as has become somewhat routine in the recent civil affairs roundtables and symposiums, this first panel presentation allows the proponent representatives to bring us up to date on what they have been working on since our last session in April, and how those initiatives relate to the symposium theme of building a global civil military network. On this slide, you see I am the facilitator once again. I've done this numerous times, and I'm still here with the U.S. Army Special Operations Command Force Mod Center, where the Civil Affairs Capability Manager now resides, as we mentioned back in April. The briefers today will start off with our joint proponent, the Joint Civil Affairs proponent, and Lieutenant Colonel Promotable Dave Henning will be speaking first. He'll be followed by Colonel Kurt Sisk, who is the current Civil Affairs Capability Manager. Following Colonel Sisk will be Colonel Jay Liddick, who was our previous Civil Affairs Capability Manager, and as Chris said, is now the Director of the U.S. Army Peacekeeping and Stability Operations Institute up at Carlisle Barracks, Pennsylvania. Following him will be Mr. Anthony Weiss, once again, and he was the Marine Corps representative in April, and he is works in the Deputy Commandant for Information Office of the Commandant at the U.S. Marine Corps. And pulling up the rear, as once again as last time, will be Lieutenant Colonel Stefan Muehlich, who is out there dialing in from the Netherlands, from the Civil Military Cooperation Center of Excellence. So, with no further ado, I will move first to the Joint Civil Affairs Proponent update. Lieutenant Colonel Henning, your mic.
Thank you, Mr. Cahill. And first off, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, fellow CA professionals, advocates, and teammates. Lieutenant Colonel Henning over here at SOCOM from the J39 Civil Affairs Branch. If you could go into the next slide, please. So just to provide
Dave,
yes.
Are you able to pull up a video or?
Unfortunately, I'm on the E in the PACE plan here this morning.
Got it.
So I'll be audio only, no video.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cahill. So the first slide here is really just to highlight to the group when we talk about the J39 Civil Affairs Branch here at the SOCOM headquarters. It's comprised of 5 personnel, 4 green suiters, and a contractor. And when we look at the joint CA proponent, really we're talking about one contracted person, and many of you may know Mr. Rob Douglas, but that's really the primary person aligned against joint proponent requirements within the headquarters. And I just say that to you all to try to be transparent, and I'm sure that you can all see some of the struggles and challenges that face the Joint Proponent Office just based on resourcing, especially as we see some of the other proponent sections later on in the brief. Next slide, please. So when we look at the J39 Civil Affairs branch, primarily rests in these two areas: our civil military engagement program. We talk about POM and baseline review. So as a program of record following US SOCOM Directive 525-38, civil military engagement program is an O&M funded P11, or excuse me, P11 O&M funded program. Annually, our team conducts a baseline review as part of our headquarters responsibility to justify the FY program costs. And our team provides context and details of the program to the SOCOM Financial Management Division during this POM process, where we justify increases, defend against cuts, describe the soft operational impacts, and build awareness on the employment of SIMCs, and as well as return on the program's investment. We look at GFM, Global Force Management, and GSOS. So we're continually engaged with the force management managers, as well as the TSOC desk officers, and then the GSOS synchronizers out of the J35, so that we can provide that input within the process for RFF, request for forces, request for support, to include the continental-based operational support. We look at our TSOC sync. This is an area where we have fell off in the more recent future when we were in the height of COVID, manning issues, as well as just how many people we could bring in. So something that we're trying to get back in action now that we have all of our personnel back. Lieutenant Colonel Clay Daniels back from his deployment, and then we have Lieutenant Colonel Audrey Hurdle here that we were missing that fourth person. So now that we have everybody back in, I'm trying to get that stood back up so that we can share our lessons across the TSOC, manage the program more effectively, leverage our fellow CA expertise across the theaters, which also goes hand in hand then with the directive and updating and publishing planning execution guidance and our CME directive. So currently the directive is requiring an update, and we are drafting changes to the directive at this time, relooking language and aligning with priorities. The last time it was updated was 2018. There are specific areas of challenge the program in the past, such as our biannual assessments every 6 months from the TSOCs to the SOCOM J3 since the beginning of the program back in 2009. There really just hasn't been a consistent deliverable across the TSOCs that measures the program's effectiveness over time. And most efforts have been short-lived and personality-driven. So why is this important to the community? We've just lacked that mechanism to highlight program achievements over time, not only through the headquarters SOCOM top 5, but also through ASD SOLIC. The TSOC sit reps, that is that first point of filtering out reporting, and oftentimes that CME reporting doesn't make the final cut, which leads to a broad lack of understanding regarding that soft CA and the current priorities to address, and we continue to try to develop our value proposition within the headquarters. Impacts integration into the headquarters process at all levels. Something as simple as CA manning within the headquarters, to having seats at the table during key headquarters discussions and working groups where solutions are sought, but often lack the linkage from the CA capability because we just don't have the personnel in the room at the table. If there's only words of force, right? We all hear that all the time. And it leads to those missed opportunities. From the joint proponent perspective, last time we were on, we talked about our annual assessment that we were provided or required to provide via JSAP to ASD SOLIC. So we're currently still pending feedback. The written product was submitted back in March of 2021. And then with delayed confirmation of the ASD SOLIC, as well as scheduling between ASD SOLIC and the J3 and other senior leader schedules, we still haven't provided the formal briefing. What we provided was a paper slide deck along with some information papers to accompany the written report. So what we're currently doing right now on the way ahead, 16 November, which is next week, the J39CA branch is briefing the Chief of Staff with our current mission analysis and some draft COAs for joint CA proponency. This, in coordination with ASD SOLIC's feedback, will provide guidance and direction for our priorities within the proponent section. So nothing, no decisions have been made yet, and no formal direction. What we're really looking from initially with the chief of staff is the direction that the command wants to go in, and get that feedback before we conduct some good, thorough mission analysis on those particular directed COAs. For the FY21 annual assessment, so TBD at this point, with DODD 2000.13, still waiting the final throes of publishing, we'll make this assessment to ASD SOLIC the annual requirement. So we anticipate end of second quarter will be the next report to be submitted, and will probably end up being the first time we actually do the in-person brief with the J3 to ASD SOLIC. Since the last one was delayed so long, you definitely came to the conclusion that it wouldn't make sense at this point to try to brief in December and then probably again in February. So we'll wait for the 21 to do the brief. And as we look at JP 357, still on track, but delayed for release by other JPs, i.e. JP 3.0. The SOCOM doctrine team is currently tracking timeline, and we're projecting sometime second or third quarter FY22 to draft for initial coordination and call for writing teams, etc. And pending any initial questions, that's all we have from the Joint Proponent Office, and I'll be followed by Colonel Kurt Sisk. Over.
Thanks, Dave. And I meant to mention before, and I did put a note in the chat, if anyone does have any questions, we'll take questions at the end after all has briefed. But if anyone does have a question, we can put it in the chat, or we can do the raise your hand at that time. So right now, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Colonel Kurt Sisk.
All right, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I appreciate the time and the invite to be here. I've been on as it's been already stated, I replaced Colonel J. Liddick August timeframe. So, we good? Okay. All right. So, and I've been on the ground about 4 months at this point in time. We have a lot of things going on here, obviously way more than what we have our staffed for, but we continue to punch above our weight. Everyone here is doing an amazing job ensuring that the branch as a whole is represented. And, it's good to see that coming together. It was missing for some time, but it's something that it's required, and it's something that's being pushed forward. Okay, next slide, Dennis. All right, so this seems to be the term of the day, at least in these parts, which is our value proposition. Essentially, what do we bring to the table? So you can see there, essentially we provide that ability to understand and address, and we use that through the CKI, which is civil knowledge integration, and we address those civil networks, the development engagement through CND&E and CMI. So essentially, what do we bring to the table that no one else does? What makes us unique, and how we provide the commander that decision dominance and that space for them to really get that 360-degree view of the battle space. Next slide. So here at UFMC, this is how we're broken down. It's a little different than it used to be. We've been pulled out of I'm sure some of you guys are already tracking this, but we're no longer over in SWIG, but we are currently under USASOC, and this is what we brought with us. Essentially, we're divided within two cells: the Concepts, Experimentation, and Exercise branch, headed by Lieutenant Colonel DeSantos, and the Requirements and Capabilities Integration, headed by Major Promotable Dave Carantini, who will pin on 05, 1 December. You have myself as the capability manager. A few years ago would have been the commandant, but now it's capability manager, with Dennis Cahill, Mr. Cahill, as the deputy. Off to the right, you'll see Dr. St. Benoit, who is our research scientist. She's heading up the Castle program, which we'll get to in just a little bit. Underneath concepts and experimentations and exercises, we have Major McDaniel, who just arrived, Brian Kaiser, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, and then also Mr. Tim Quinlan, who you probably all are familiar with as well. I think the name pretty much says it all and what they do, but if anybody has any questions, please just let me know. And then, of course, requirements, capabilities, and integration. We have Dr. Dale Walsh, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with as well. The two captains positions we currently have vacant, we'll get those filled in June of 2022, and they are going to be coded 97 Echo. So they'll be coming to us straight from training with industry, so they can bring all that goodness they've got in those networks. They can bring them here, and we can begin to inject it into what we're doing. We're still missing our master sergeant, and we've just recently added Mr. Dylan Montgomery, who's a former 95th guy who's really pushing forward and heading up the S&T piece, which was a gap for us previously. Major Fiddledye, she's coming off orders right now. Unfortunately, there just wasn't the budget to continue, but we're going to look to reinvigorate that position here in the spring when more funds become available, so as you can see, the TDA is starting to come together, but it still causes a split in what we're doing. So we're responsible for the concept development, organizational development, material development, facility recommendations, and policy recommendations. Okay. Doctrine, training, leadership development, education, and personnel management still resides over in SWIC. So anything along those lines, we have to coordinate with SWIC as we move forward. It's added another layer, but that's the hand we've been dealt, and that's what we continue to work with. So next slide, Dennis. Okay, now these are our major priorities. So they're broken down to 5 major priorities, and then you see the other items that are nested below it. Number 1 on the priority list is the FMA. So the FMA has been approved by Army Futures. It took them a long time to do it, but it's finally been approved. So we're going to continue to push that forward in the AROC process. Now, a couple of the big things you may have noticed that have come out of that have already been actioned. The doctrine 3-57 that came out in July, which is probably one of the most sweeping changes to our doctrine I've seen during my tenure within this career field. As well as the new MOSs on the active component side. So you have a 38 Romeo, which is a civil reconnaissance sergeant, 38 Whiskey, which is a medical sergeant, 38 Zulu, which is a CA senior sergeant, and then the 38 Tango, which is a training of sessions. Then you also have a 38 Sierra on the officer side of the house. Now within the NCOs, this reclass will take place, or is taking place right now, and the position recodes will be 1 October of 23. For the officer side, that reclass has already occurred, and they're presently recoding positions right now. Civil affairs, science and technology, learning ecosystem, CASL. Now this is taking the place of CCAS. Okay, so CCAS is no more. CCAS was much like some of the systems that we had in the past. This is incorporating more. So it's born out of doctrine with civil knowledge integration, switching from SIM to civil knowledge integration. It's going to have a training component, which is a civil affairs specific framework. So taking ASCOPE and PMISI to the next level. Now we're getting after this through a multidisciplined approach from academics, socioethnologists, anthropologists, and that in the different academic fields that we just don't have access to. Now, as I said, Dr. St. Benoit is working this issue and working this piece. And then once the framework is developed, it's also going to produce a material solution, right? That platform that we've all been begging for, that we've, Palantir, hey, great product. Unfortunately, we don't own any of the data when it's done. ArcGIS, and the various others, name your flavor. So this is trying to do something that will both integrate us within the IPB, the targeting process, and produce for us a CPB, a civil preparation of the battlefield, as well as providing that civil operating picture. Now we're working in conjunction with Department of State and IMAT, the Marines with MARSIMS, First SFC to ensure that we're nested in with the needs of the soft CA formation. West Point, OSD ADL is assisting. We're also integrating all that was CCAS. So everything that went into CCAS, it's not just going away, it's going to be integrated and subsumed by the CASL project. And a lot of the work with CCAS was done through West Point's in conjunction with UC-CAPOC. And it's also going to have a training platform that will be within SWIC. So, which being the former 3rd Battalion commander, that's one thing that I was, just overjoyed to see, because the POI within SWIC is not where it needs to be. It never has been where it needs to be, and it doesn't fully address both the reserves and the active component. So this is going to be building it from the ground forward. It's going to tie into project conversions. Dylan's working that piece right now. Just coincidentally enough, one of the individuals that's working project conversions up at Eustis was a former company commander of mine as an AGR 38 Alpha. Is a great individual who is just smart guy, but he's going to give us that alignment, and hopefully, again, it's that network development. How do we do it? We don't just do it on the battlefield. We do it within everything that we do. Okay. Within EAB LOE 22-1, which is a limited objective experiment, it's essentially how we support the course. There's expected command relationships, the interoperability, the integration, the interdependency, right? The I3. So we're looking at how the conventional forces and the soft CA forces, their activities in the core operating area, how is that done? Again, opening the Army's eyes to what we do, how we do it together, and how this benefits the Army writ large. The IAOPTs, this line of effort is enabled decision-making. And so it's providing a CA unique civil knowledge integration, and it's increased authorizations for the multi-domain effects battalion, as well as the theater info advantage elements. And then, of course, you have with the Irregular Warfare Technical Support Directorate down there at the bottom on number 3. This is formerly known as CTTSO, but now they're the IWTSD. So they have been building products for us. One is the TAC, which I'm going to have to look off to my right because I'm still learning things. But this is an Android tactical assault kit that will allow the users to share and visualize civil information across DOS, DoD, and USAID. So linking those military with the interagency partner, it's a tactical piece. It goes right on your iPhone, and again, it lends towards that civil operating picture, providing that 360-degree view. They're also going to provide that irregular warfare course as well as the governance support course. So again, if this is something that we're going to push forward in and really get after, it has to be in the training base. And Johns Hopkins is going to be providing that. Raytheon is going to be providing the TAC, and they're going to be providing a kickoff here next week. We haven't got the full date time groups yet, but that's coming. Now, if you notice, 2 and 3 are interconnected, so they're mutually supporting, because derivatives of Castle are within 3, and then a lot of what's done in 3 is supporting number 2. But the idea is to get that product, that training solution, that framework, and that material that has been largely missing from our formations. Number 4 is the transitional governance and stability capability development. So as I just said, we're working with Johns Hopkins. They're going to provide a kickoff next week. And I know I'm particularly looking forward to that, because I know that was something that we were kind of messing around with in 3rd Battalion a few years back, and I'd really like to see where it's progressed to. Now, within the CA Force design update, of course, Dr. Dale Walsh is still working with UC Capoc with their FDU developments, and we're still working the FDU junior execution with the 95th. The big piece down here is the coding NIMTOs for advanced civil schooling. So, we always preach that education is a command initiative, a command priority. But by coding those positions, it will give us the opportunity to tap into the resources that we haven't been able to do before, to ensure that our formations are both highly skilled technically, tactically, but also well educated to give them that perspective that isn't brought to the table anywhere else. Okay. Next slide, Dennis. Yep. So providing, if there are any questions, if not, then I'll go ahead and turn it over to Jay and let him tell everybody about PKSOI.
Thank you, Colonel Sisk. And Colonel Liddick, are you on and
Hey,
can you turn on
good
your camera?
morning. Dennis, can you hear me?
I can. Go ahead, Jim.
All right. My camera's on. Can you guys see me? Okay, perfect. All right. Sorry for the technical. As you can see, I don't have the best setup at the moment as I'm in my aviator headset. I want to thank the CAA for this opportunity to talk to the group and for bringing us all together. Because I can't stress from my personal and professional opinion how important it is to have a professional forum for civil affairs professionals, to facilitate development, constant dialogue, and for us all as professionals to think deeply about our profession. And I'll tell you, hearing Kurt's brief and what we've discussed in the first session, it truly excites me that the momentum we have right now, and I think it's incredible the work that's been done by John with the podcasts, the articles through UNOMA, the symposium. We have to keep it going, and we have to keep synced. The one thing coming from previous jobs and setting in this one is our community who looks at these things, and I'll get into the PKSOI aspect in a second. We've got to be together, and we've got to be synchronized in our communication and never working at cross purposes, because we have enough challenges without working against each other. So it's great that we have these forums to bring it together, synchronize, and continue us to move forward. So Dennis, if you can just go to the next slide. So I'm only putting this one slide up, and this is for everyone to understand, PKSOI, our mission, how we're viewing things in terms of lines of operation, and what our end state is. And for those who aren't familiar with the U.S. Army Peacekeeping and Stability Ops Institute, we are the joint proponent for stabilization and peace operations. The Army is designated the lead for that, and then that is down through TRADOC and CAC to us. So we execute that on behalf of the Army for the Joint Force. And we recently went through a change that some may not be aware of. We are still located at Carlisle Barracks here in beautiful South Central Pennsylvania. And we work with the Army War College, but we no longer directly work for the Army War College. Myself and my organization, we work directly for the Combined Arms Center CG, Lieutenant General Martin. I know there was some consternation about that change, but I think it positions us well. We still can work hand in hand with the Army War College. Major General Hill is a phenomenal advocate for us here, but we work for the Combined Arms Center, Lieutenant General Martin, who's also a tremendous advocate for it. And we know that, in the Army, that 3-star position carries a tremendous amount of weight. So I think it's actually a good thing for us in terms of positioning and advocacy and the forums that we're able to be in on. So again, going back to that proponency and what's that mean, and looking across .mlpfp, we don't do the full spectrum of .mlpfp as a joint proponent, but what we're really focused on is the policy and strategy, concepts and doctrine, training and education, and leader development and education, or training and exercises, I'm sorry. And our current set is 3 military, 10 civilian, 1 international officer, 4 contractors, and then 2 reservists that are phenomenal, and they're in a DEMA status that we work their time into what we're doing. So about 20 packs. So we're a little smaller, and with that, I've been in the seat about 90 days, and we as an organization are really focused on, we have 2 responsibilities: moving forward stabilization and moving forward peace operations. And we're looking at all our processes internally, synchronization. To be frank, we're not in a position to do a lot of nice to do things. We have to be focused on the critical must do things to move things forward in terms of stabilization, which is why this is a great forum. I mean, obviously I may be biased in terms that I am a civil affairs officer, but civil affairs is absolutely critical capability in stabilization. And as Dave Henning alluded to earlier, the DoD 2000.13 is in the process of being updated. It's literally just awaiting signature. And in that document, it actually specifies that civil affairs as a capability being a lead executor for stabilization for DoD. And I think that's a really important point. When you look at where we're at and what's being done, and I mean, and again, I think timing is going well for civil affairs in terms of momentum. When you look at civil development network engagement, civil knowledge integration, civil military integration, transitional governance, and how the branch is moving forward and clarifying our role, and then really digging in and getting the training set for civil affairs. And that, to me, from a stabilization lens for overall for DoD, that is tremendously moving the Army forward in being able to execute the tasks required. And I say this a lot, not to go on a rabbit hole, but if you believe Clausewitz that war is politics by other means, I would also argue that the application of the military is always for a political end. So having a force that understands that and is working across the continuum to tie back through the network of partners that we have to solidify political objectives is absolutely critical. And we just have to continue to work towards that end. And PKSOI is here to work with the civil affairs force as best and as we can. And one of the efforts we're doing is working with the Proponent Directorate on solidifying or the development of 357.10, the Transitional Governance Manual. And I think that's a huge step forward for the Civil Affairs Force, but it's also a huge step forward for the Army and then ultimately the Joint Forces. We can share that information with the Marine Corps. I think we're at an interesting point for all of us here, that as we look to a new national security strategy, then a subsequent new national defense strategy, national military strategy, and where does stabilization fall out in that? So that's something that we're leaning forward in the past. The 2018 national security strategy had a irregular warfare annex that really put some horsepower behind stabilization. I think the one challenge we have, and it'll be interesting to see where we go forward, is stabilization, in my professional opinion, is absolutely a critical component of IW, but stabilization is a critical component of warfare. And we have the competition piece that we're working in on a daily basis in terms of theater security cooperation execution, working with our DOS and USAID partners. But when you look at large-scale combat operations, which the Army, particularly in DoD writ large, is really focused on, you don't have to look far in history to see that large-scale combat operations is replete with stabilization challenges. And ultimately, the end goal is to consolidate battlefield success into political advantage and victory. So I think we as a community have to continue to push towards that. The information operations component of that the Army is really digging into, and I know Kurt and his team are digging into, is another piece of that we have to be melded into correctly for us to get it right. And I would encourage everyone to look at the past FM30 from the Army, but also be aware of the new FM30 that'll be coming out this coming late spring. But I think the Army does a pretty good job of articulating consolidation of gains, and that the work that the capability managers team is doing with the civil affairs task force concept is a key component of that, of getting civil affairs wedded in so that the Army can consolidate gains and ultimately do stabilization correctly. So I have 5 highlights just for the group, for everyone's awareness. One thing from our organization, again, we're resetting and trying to think deeply about the areas that we work in. We're about to publish an article series on stabilization that walks stabilization through competition, large-scale combat operations, and irregular warfare, and a historical perspective as well. We are the the entity responsible for Joint Pub 3-07 stabilization activities. That is literally waiting signature, and we anticipate that to be published in December final. And as Dave said earlier with 357, JP 357, I think it sets conditions for that. And it was tied to the rewrite of JP 30. Another thing that I think is valuable to this community that we're working hard to get to a sustainable, institutionalized delivery mechanism is what was formerly known as the Joint Stabilization Studies course. We did a pilot course out of PKSY in February. I think there's some folks on the line here today that were part of that pilot course. A 1-month course, 3 asynchronous virtual weeks, and then a week of in residence here at Carlisle. We are pushing forward with, again, getting that course institutionalized for delivery, retitled to the Joint Interagency Stabilization course, because that's the value of that course, is to bring those who will be tasked for planning and executing stabilization at the strategic and operational level together to learn about stabilization, understand the past and current set, and how do you actually plan this at a Army or at a ASCC or the Service Component Command level across the forces, and then at a GCC, and possibly even delving down to folks who work at the corps level in the division level. But the intent is to do 2 courses a year, one in March, one in October, 30 personnel per class. So get 60 professionals through that course. We'll be sharing instructor responsibility with DOS and USAID, and we'll work through who gets a seat in the course. And one of the things that we've all talked about and agreed upon from a DOS and USAID perspective is that we've got to be judicious, and it's got to be folks getting the seats that are going to go into those positions and have the responsibility for planning and executing. The next one, just for everyone's essay in this community, we're working closely with OSD Shaw in a support mode as DOD, USAID, and Department of State work through the Global Fragility Act implementation. And Global Fragility Act is a thing that was passed by Congress. It has funding behind it, and it provides a means to do a 10-year look at locations with partners who are not in the throes of conflict, and how do we, in that competitive space, in that theater security cooperation space from a DoD perspective, work together better to to help our partner maintain and increase resiliency. And my personal take on this effort is it's an important one. We've got to ensure DoD is integrated correctly, and that the lessons learned that comes out of this, for good or for bad, it can be positive for us as a community of interest, or negative if we don't do this right and we don't truly do it in a 3D manner. My last one, just for essay as well, from our joint proponent responsibility, we work with OSD Shaw and DoD and executing the biannual stabilization assessment. The 2020 assessment was just signed a few weeks ago, and we're back in the process of framing out what are the questions, what are the areas that we're going to delve into in this assessment. So sorry for the long ramble. I really appreciate this forum, and again, thanks to the association and everyone. Over.
Great rundown, Jay. Thank you very much. And we will go on now to Aaron Weiss. Aaron, are you up?
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Cahill, president of the association for having us. So My name is Anthony Weiss. I am currently working for the Deputy Commandant for Information, the newest Deputy Commandant of the Marine Corps, set up in the last couple of years, really focusing on those information capabilities to cover, civil affairs being one of them. I currently work in the Information Maneuver Division, the readiness section of that division, and I am a member one of one when it comes to this capability set. I am not a one of one when it comes to CA Marines working in that section. There's a number of people that we've sent to the schoolhouse, and even some friends and family of the Civil Affairs Association and community. To name one, Mr. James Jabinall, if you know him, who works also in the maneuver division, but a different section of the division. We cover everything across the down PFP, and are really a supplemental element to the capability developers based down in CD, down in Quantico at capability development and integration section. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to go over a couple different things that we've been able to do, and where we're kind of going on some of these items. Keeping it real quick, right to the point. So we held a virtual civil affairs working group for the Marine Corps units and civil affairs professionals in the springtime. This was held over a number of months, COVID restrictions and all that, having no one able to come and do a annual get together, let's hear back from the community. So we held that virtually, coming up with about 50 different categories across the down PFP that we've been able to start working on. These, fed into some of our actions we were already working, which I'll get down to MARSIMs on that and our force professionalization. But we also were able to look at some of the things that we weren't expecting and hearing directly from the community. You see there, we have our CA policy. We have written a Marine Corps civil military operations and civil affairs operations policy that is right near to being finished. It really kind of gets at some of the governance of the community, setting that up for which 3-star has which responsibilities for the community as a whole, and kind of educating the force and what we actually do. We are one of the only information capabilities that was cut when our Marine Corps went through a 2025 review, but we're trying to, reclaim some of that force structure, while also showing how we are relevant for the future elements. Next down into our force professionalization, you have the 17XX initiative. So this was under General Reynolds, who retired this past summer. She was very big about professionalization, and we are able to now, we're going to recode the civil affairs community into a 17XX code set. There's going to be a 2-pronged process for this. The aft component will recode to fall under an influence officer position, or influence Marine position, which will have a PSYOP and CA kind of flavoring and professional career track for those individuals. Our reserve component will still maintain what they are right now, where they are 1730s, 31s, I'm sorry, 30s, 32s. Those would be that way for a little while, with the plan at some point to relook at a study of, any deconfliction or any issues where we, pull them into this influence officer realm. One of the biggest things coming out of this recoding is we are also going to be upgrading our clearances for all of our civil affairs planners across the force. It's been one of the biggest issues we've run into, where we have planners that have secret clearances across the community. And, time and time again, they're really unable to integrate some of their material from the get. So that is one thing that's going to happen on both the aft component and the reserve component. We're also relooking at some of our billets that we have across the force, some of the onesie twosies that are placed at various locations, and trying to just make sure we have them in the right planner spots. Within the 17XX and force professionalization item, we do have a couple new units that are coming online. That is the Marine Littoral Regiment, which is going to have a team at each MLR. And that really kind of gives us a full active component element at those forward pressed forces. When we were developing the MLRs, we did start working on, hey, where does the civil affairs community fall? And even from one prior individual was talking about stabilization. We looked at how do we still perform stabilization, but not really, put it out there that we do stabilization. Some of the Marine Corps elements are still a little bit, that's phase 4, or that's not really what we want to be doing. So how do we still show that civil affairs is right there at the forefront? So we started working on network engagement and network development, and took those kind of tenets from what we had from irregular warfare, stabilization, and integrated those into those new Marine Corps tasks and new essential items for the MLRs. It's also trying to work that into multiple areas across the Marine Corps. That network engagement and network analysis, be that SIM for us, would still have be placed in other units where we can show, hey, highlight the civil affairs capability set. The TNR development, part of the 17XX, of course, is to relook at the training requirements. And even to take into account the new network engagement materials. We just had a TNR the last couple of years. So this is actually just giving us an opportunity to really relook at it outside of cycle. That's actually going to be kicking off next week. The individual tasks and the collective tasks were both sent out to the communities for them to kind of do a quick edit on, or really what their main items are, and they're actually going to be due back Wednesday of this week. So I'm going to have a very late night Wednesday. And then because of the professionalization, the 17XX stuff, our MOS course, McMoss, is already looking at FY22 about increasing an MOS course from 3 courses to 4, and possibly also increasing the planners courses depending on what's going on. This is really looking at, where we need to adjust anything in the schoolhouse. And even if we need to take some of the PSYOP material and kind of incorporate it into what we're planning or what we're teaching at that base ground level. And then the last item I have on there is MARSIMS. So we were able to take 3 different tasks that came out of our civil affairs working group and already incorporate those into a new program of record, or at least the program of record requirements documentation for MARSIMS. We're still looking at how we can integrate that system and improve that system so we can share it with not only our partners, our civil affairs community, adjacent units, so on and so forth, but equally how we can take any of the analysis that we're performing and share it up to our intel folks. That's always been a challenge, seeing that we are working on NIPR, or regular unclassed net, which is still the first Marine Corps cloud-based program, but still doing that analysis. Once we start aggregating that material, we know how that all becomes, secret or TS level. So we're still trying to work how to get that data up that way. But even in that process, we started looking at publicly available information, how to integrate that into MARSIMS, or how to equally integrate our information into the publicly available information analysis tools that the Marine Corps is developing. That's all I have, pending any questions from the community.
Thanks, Anthony. We'll take questions after. And on that last point, the MARSIMS, we had an opportunity here at the CA Capability Manager's Office to see a demo of the MARSIMS last week, and I think we were really impressed. I was glad to see it was finally a POR, and it definitely has some areas that we can collaborate and incorporate across between the Army and Marine Corps Civil Affairs in the future. So. Sure. Great. Well, thanks. And we're going to move on now to our final briefer, and that will be Lieutenant Colonel Stefan Muehlich. Stefan, are you there? There you are. We can see you.
Yeah, I'm
your
here.
mic
Can
is-
you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, Stefan, you're good.
All right, if you can click on the next slide. Yeah, I will present you only this one slide tonight. It's just a structure that I will follow through, that the content will be verbally spoken. It was very interesting to listen to the earlier speakers and to what's going on in the U.S. forces with regard to civil affairs development. And I want to, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak here as a representative of the rest of the alliance, which is a burden that is far too heavy for me. So that's the second thing I want to make clear. I'm not speaking officially for NATO. This is the view of a branch chief in a NATO accredited center of excellence. And please bear with me if it's not totally inclusive and not reflecting all perspectives throughout the alliance. Before I start, I see two trends in NATO CIMIC where we develop. Some nations see CIMIC more and more in the basket of, I call them non-lethal effectors. So instruments to project effects with non-lethal methods like Stratcom, PsyOps, InfoOps, and put CIMIC and CMI in that basket. And another trend is that CIMIC tries to take more and more the responsibility for the analysis and assessment of the civil environment. And this is also reflected in the latest developments of NATO policy and doctrine. The most prominent example and first bullet on my slide is the MC411/3. That's the NATO policy on CIMIC and CMI. And for NATO, CMI is defined as civil-military interaction, not integration. So you already see, one of the recurring challenges we have, that we have abbreviations and terms used in a different way. So the challenge will never stop. The new definitions of CIMIC and CMI were necessary and are in a draft version, second draft out for comments to the nations. And what I don't know the final version of them yet, but I have contributed to the development, and I've seen the recent changes in the commenting rounds. The new nature of the CIMIC definition and the CMI definition is that we widen the scope from a operation-focused approach to a continuum of competition focused approach. So we ensure our relevance, we claim our relevance throughout all phases of from peacetime to crisis and conflict and past conflict. So as stated, throughout the continuum. Secondly, we claim the responsibility that CIMIC is responsible as a joint function, is responsible for the integration of the understanding of the civil environment in NATO's decision-making processes. So by that, we claim a leading role, being the coordinating function for the analysis and assessment of the civil environment. That gives us relevance and importance, but at the same time, it loads us with a burden as we haven't developed the capability and capacity to do a lot of those analysis and assessment tasks ourselves right now. So we have to develop this capability. This is identified as a action to take, and it has been acknowledged and prioritized to the highest level in NATO. So on the operational side of the house, it is up to a 4-star level, and it was qualified there as a very prominent gap. So we have visibility on the highest level with this, but now we also have the responsibility to deliver. So it is interesting and challenging, and we have to work hard to fulfill those expectations. What we do in the house here is that we have, as a prioritized project here, we have been writing and are still writing an analysis and assessment concept for CIMIC, and therefore we also were about to reach out to the other side of the Atlantic and to visit our most relevant partners over there, but due to COVID restrictions, the last planned trip was again postponed to early next year. So this is still on our to-do list. Second thing that I want to mention is that we are finally about to develop a definition of comprehensive approach. Yeah, the definition is very inclusive. Reality looks different. So the difference between theory and reality is that in our doctrine and in our policies, we are tasked to coordinate with everybody, anywhere, at any time. But at the same time, nations are limiting us with the authorization, the mandate they give us in peacetime, with whom we are allowed to talk, on what level. And so this is a discrepancy between the theory and reality. And we try here at the CCOE to take influence on that those challenges are solved. But in the end, it is really a challenge on political level and far above my pay grade and even above the military level. It's about national sovereignties that are affected here and that are perceived to be threatened when NATO is interfering in national responsibilities, and that's really, from my point of view, the biggest showstopper for the progression of improving our policies and doctrine to a state where it really enables us to do what we are supposed to do in those new times, where we have to be active below the threshold of a crisis that is already involving the North Atlantic Council and North Atlantic Council approval for activities. The second challenge that we face with that development is that the development of a new capability along the whole .mil-FPF spectrum, of course, requires also new resources, and getting new positions, getting new tools. This all is expensive, and in the past adaptations of the NATO command structure, peacetime and crisis establishment review, the CIMICers were more or less always the ones that were glad to survive or glad to not be further reduced. So we have to go from a negative trend to turn it around into a positive trend and convince everybody that if you want us to wear the shoes that you have designed for us, you have to give us 2 legs and bigger feet. I could continue with examples how challenging coordination on each level in the hierarchy and across the levels of hierarchies. But I will leave it with this and give you one more positive outlook that we really hope that we can execute the planned courses for Euro-NATO CIMIC familiarization for US civil affairs headquarters and units, that we will be able to execute those in the first quarter 2022. And last outlook, we are in a much mature phase of our doctrine comparison that we had initiated, and as I had announced in our last meeting, where we are comparing NATO doctrine and US civil affairs doctrine on CIMIC versus civil affairs. Where's the overlap, where are the synchronies, and where is the gap? Unfortunately, I don't have a deliverable today, but I got a coordinated draft at the end of last week. So we are working on it, and I hope that we will be able to share this with you by end of the year or early next year. And we expect the new policy, by the way, to be endorsed somewhat at the end of this year. And as soon as we have that, we will of course announce it on our website, and we will share what is shareable with you. An outlook for 2022, we have initiated the review process of the CIMIC doctrine. That's one level below the policy. The CIMIC doctrine review will be our main effort doctrine-wise in the year 2022. And we hope that we can deconflict with all that I've heard earlier, like you are using terms like civil military engagement, civil military integration, civil knowledge integration, and all those terms. Really interesting for us. It would be the most desirable and achievable status if we could have all our policies and doctrines synchronized with regard to the existence and use of those terms, because the common language is I think a crucial basis for increased interoperability. And with that, I want to give it back to Dennis, and I'm open for questions in this session. Over.
Thank you, Stefan. And actually, your very last point is something I was going to ask you about. I know the multinational CIMIC group headquartered in Italy, like yourself, would also like to come over and meet with its counterparts here in the United States. And I think the pandemic has prevented that from happening so far. There may have been some virtual communication with civil affairs units here in the States, but I was wondering if you could quickly, because again, the multinational CIMIC group as well as the CIMIC COE are part of our civil military network. Can you describe your relationship with the multinational CIMIC group, and maybe what kinds of civil networking activities has that group been engaged in lately? Over.
Yeah, of course, I will try to describe that the multinational CIMIC group is a unit and has actually deployable forces, operational forces, while we are the think tank and the training and education facility for NATO. So they are a force provider for NATO. They also are running courses, training, education, but mainly on the tactical level. So tactical level on NATO side means up to core level. Our courses are mainly for the operational and higher tactical level. That is the theater component commands and the joint level that we cover. Our relationship with them is a productive one. We are not redundant. We are adding up to meet NATO requirements. So wherever we have points where we touch, like when we are working on publications, doctrine that is covering the tactical level, of course, we closely include the multinational CIMIC group. And whenever they develop something, or when they execute training and education activities, they will definitely coordinate that with our training education branch, because our Center of Excellence here is formally the department head for NATO CIMIC and CMI training and education, as well as we are the custodian for HAP 319, which is the CIMIC doctrine. So we have those formal roles, and by that, we are an address to be contacted and coordinated with whenever multinational CIMIC group is taking action on those in those areas. Would that be a good answer for the first moment, Dennis?
Yes, Stefan, thank you very much. Very good answer. And we'll see if there's any other questions towards that point when we get into the question and answer period, which starts now. And I think what I'll do first is go back into the chat. There are several questions have already been posted. I'll start there and see where it leads us. First one looks like it's from Joseph Montagne. How important is the 38 Golf program at building and maintaining a network of subject matter experts? And why have qualified 38 Bravos been shut out of participating in direct commission panels or even being able to submit applications to those panels? I'll ask Colonel Sisk to take that on as best he can. Colonel Sisk.
Okay, so as I said, my opinion, the 38 Golfs are absolutely essential into maintaining that network of expertise. They have the ability far and above what anything the active component can do in terms of staying integrated, working with or by with and through with these civilian entities. We just don't have representation there. Now, it's the question for the 38 Bravo that specifically falls in the line of personnel. And as I laid out earlier, personnel now falls directly under SWIC. I would have to get with SWIC and Tommy Borden to find out the answers to those questions.
Thank you, Colonel Sisk. And the next question came from Colonel Joe Curlin. What has been done to meet the delta in rank for enlisted at the unit level for reserve units? And in here, I guess, what do they call it? A lifeline or a call to a friend. I'm going to ask Dr. Dale Walsh, who's in the session today, to respond to that one. Dr. Walsh?
Hey, Dennis, can you guys hear me?
Got you, Dale.
All right, good. If you can't blink twice, that way I know that I'm coming through. But anyway, with regards to Joe's question, and if I read it correctly, he is referring to the lack of or the insufficient amount of Sergeant E5 billets at the company level. The current FTU working groups that we have been holding with KPOC, we are addressing that. And the intent is to move forward with growing the team size from 4 individuals to 8 individuals. And the teams will have the requisite number of sergeant authorizations. So we won't have to worry about losing our junior enlisted guys to non-civil affairs formations so they can be promoted up through the ranks. So the intent, like I said, right now is a junior enlisted can progress from E4 specialist up to master sergeant within the same battalion and brigade and stay within that same geographical radius that his current company is in. Over.
Thank you, Dale. And I was going to ask Joe, does that answer the question, or did you have any follow-up? Over. And if not, I guess I'm going to go back to the 38 Golf question. And I got a note from Colonel Chuck Burnett, who is the current Deputy Commanding Officer at SWIC, that he can weigh in on the 38 Golf answer. So Colonel Burnett, are you able to unmute? Over.
You got me, Dennis? Okay, good deal. Yeah, so, thanks for the question on 38 Golf. And, I won't get into the details. I know this has been a conversation. And so with the change of 357 and the 38 Golf AOC, the intent is that we're trying to distill it and focus it on what the requirements are. And so there's processes that are going on right now through the Personnel Directorate of the Civil Affairs Proponent to try to adjust that and meet what the requirements are based on the new doctrine. With regard to the question about quote unquote shutouts of 38 Bravos, the challenge we have right now from the 38 Bravo perspective is manning and DMOSQ strength of the reserve component Compo 3 force. And so it doesn't do us much good at this point in time, at least from the perspective of the overall branch, when we are allowing individuals to come over from the enlisted side to try to go direct commission at 38 Golf. That doesn't mean that it's a complete non-starter. There's always ETPs to everything. And so, but in general, what we're trying to do is not decrement one underfilled portion of the force to build the other portion of the force. And so we end up, really not helping ourselves. And so trying to focus on specifically that problem. And so I know it's a lot more detailed, and every individual situation is different. And, General Dickerson, Lieutenant Colonel Dickerson and myself have had a pretty good conversation on that, with General Dickerson now being assigned here as the DCGI at SWIC. And he is very involved in it. And that was one of the first topics that we discussed with him when he came on board. So it is something that the personnel proponent or director of the Civil Affairs Proponent is working very diligently on. And it's also something that I, as the DCO here, with oversight of all 3 of the branch proponents that SWIC is responsible for, that I'm looking at. So I hope that gives you some context to probably something that, seen as like, oh, well, here's the MILPER. We can't do this anymore. Why was the change? But the intent is to get us much more focused and distilled on the 38 Golf capacity, so we can actually build that capability for the Army that has been a challenge for us as a branch over the last few years. Thank you. Over.
Colonel Bennett, thank you very much. And I guess I'll ask Joseph Montagne, does that answer your question, or do you have any follow-ups? Over. Okay, nothing heard there. And so next question in the chat came from Brigadier General retired Chris Stockel. I would be interested in what folks think about Palantir data. I think Army owns the data, not them. Are there any thoughts? Does anybody have a response to that question? Over.
I guess, I'm the one that said it. So from my perspective, when we were doing the ANONS for the 95th, roughly 7 years ago, to try and get a Palantir platform. That was one of the major hangups. In addition to the cost, was the fact that at the end of the day, we would not own the data. Over.
Yeah, so Chris Sacco here.
Go ahead, sir. There was a bit of an echo, but I think we can still hear you. Over. General Stockel, did you have a follow-up? Over.
Yeah, sorry about that. The I think that was like just on some of their reps that were kind of missing representing the exact integrity of that data, who owned it and stuff like that. Because I spent quite a bit of time with them at AUSA, and the people that create the data own the data. So in the absence of anything, I think, you know, Palantir is a pretty strong product. I don't know why SOCOM's trying to develop their own product right now. And so is there any hope for some kind of platform? We've been doing this for 20 something years. And like at SOCPAC, when I worked with them, when I commanded the 351, it had to do with, they feed everything into Sydney and then just suck it into Palantir to do the analysis. So I'll pause here for a comment and then we'll move on. Thanks, Dennis, and everybody else.
Right, sir. So we're not SOCOM is just not trying to produce its own system. And I think that's part of the issue we've had going through the years, is everyone's been trying to produce their own system. The 95th was trying to produce their own system. What was going on at SWIC was being done in a stovepipe. So that's why we're taking a more methodical approach. We're not looking at trying to create something new. Think of it as a tool of suites, pulling from existing products that are out there, finding out what best fits our needs, which in itself will create a material solution. The other piece of the CASTLE program, which is not something that was done in previous attempts, is we're actually working with the practitioners. So Dr. St. Benoit went to a training event with the 95th to kind of get to see what their guys were doing, what they were pulling in, how they were going about their jobs. She's also going to be deploying forward for a period of time to do the same thing in Oconus location. While she's there, she's also going to tie in with our NATO allies to ensure that we are being, you know, for lack of a better term, inclusive on how we're approaching this project, which is also why we're having to tie in with the academic fields, again, to move us beyond, I guess I'm jumping to another question. I'll stop right there. But we're bringing in the academic fields to create that framework. We're bringing in multiple partners to ensure that we have that interoperability, that data is being fed across multiple platforms. It has the ability to push and pull across multiple platforms, as well as step up to a more classified version that we can use for our other missions. But the biggest piece of it is it cannot be stovepiped. It cannot just be a system that does not talk to anybody else. And that's where OSD-ADL comes into play as well. So the problem, another issue that we had was training and education of our force. The POI 3rd Battalion, as I said earlier, you know, that's the first step for every one of our future team leaders, future NCOs and team sergeants. Where do they get that foundational training to ensure that they're going about this in a practical manner? So I guess I'll go ahead and delve into it right now. So that's where, you know, you're learning the analyst notebook, ArcGIS, and it's all done within ASCOPE and PMISI. Well, ASCOPE and PMISI don't necessarily get after the things we need to get after. They're great for binning data, but when you want to talk about analysis and being able to add AI into that, there needs to be a human aspect to that analysis, as well as potentially machine learning, which is not something that we have currently. So if we can build that foundation within SWIC, we can then create a training platform and training program that carries forward throughout that NCO's career, throughout that officer's career, as they continue to move forward. Again, not something that we've ever had before. So we're looking at this from a broader perspective of just what kind of tool are we making? You know, we're looking at this more holistically, so it's something that can benefit the regiment and the Army the regiment, the Army, interagency, joint, and our multinational partners, to give them what we really haven't been able to do in the past, which is that CPB, the COP, with analysis and academic rigor behind it. Over.
Thanks. And Rick and Nick got a little bit of a chat going on there, so I'll turn it back over to Dennis. I definitely appreciate that. You know, I don't want to go down the whole Afghanistan, Iraq thing, but you know, an analyst notebook, link analysis, and some kind of Google Earth snapshot with a call out box is like considered an above average civil affairs common operating picture, when we all know it's not. You know, it's so much more than that. But that's frequently what our soldiers do. And then there's the training. You talked it all. So again, more work than resources. So I fully appreciate everyone's workload and working hard on the problem. So thank you very much. Thanks, Dennis. Thanks, Rick.
And gentlemen, the other, or ladies and gentlemen, I don't know who else in the audience, but the other piece to remember is that this project is still within its first year. Okay, so we're continuing to move this forward, but again, we're moving forward. We want to move forward in a methodical manner to ensure that we're going to provide the operational force, regardless of component, regardless of location, regardless of what category they fall into in terms of interagency, NATO, joint, that we're going to be providing something that is beneficial for all. Over.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you for that answer or question and answers. We'll move on to the next one here from Doug Jordan at the Joint Special Operations University. Can the speakers address the new emerging doctrine of IA, information advantage, and how this will affect civil affairs? The information in joint operations is a fundamental shift. He also adds draft joint, I guess was JP 304. There's some opportunities presenting themselves. Doug, I would ask, can you come online and provide some additional context to this question? And I will ask each of the panel members to respond in kind. Over.
Yeah, what I'm hoping is that we've done a good job within the joint staff of staffing this document, because what we're finding is at Joint Special Operations University, this new idea of looking at information advantage or information as a joint function provides opportunities. So like our colleague from Center of Excellence, we're talking to Center of Excellence for strategic communication. But I just really think that this conference is a good opportunity to discuss how this fundamental change of JP1, JP 304, JP 3, I think there's really going to be additional opportunities for civil affairs. And I just like each of the presenters, if they have something they've been working on that's relevant, I think I'd really like to hear it. Thanks.
Thanks, Doug. And I'm going to ask Mr. Weiss to answer first from the Marine Corps perspective, because I know they do a lot of work in the information realm. Over.
Thank you, sir. So, one thing that we've, with us taking on the 7th Joint Warfighting Function and, under DCI, we've integrated civil affairs across all of the function areas that we have when it comes to the breakdown of how we're going to be implementing information and gaining the advantage. All the way from command and control, network engagement, inform, influence, attack and deceive, all of these kind of things. CA has been part of the conversation from the beginning. We're also looking at everything in kind of a twofold manner where it comes to soft science material, influence capability sets, and informed capability sets, and then hard science, your electronic magnetic spectrum, space, equity, cyber, stuff like that. One thing that we've been really big about is getting civil affairs educated individuals in some of those planning discussions with the hard science capability sets, just to kind of make them think about what they might be performing. I had the great opportunity last year, right before everything shut down, to attend the Air Force or Space Force Space 200 course and get the MOS for that. And sitting in there with a joint community, you know, talking about how green is affected by disabling a satellite, or how we could use some of the civilian capabilities or understanding of what those systems might be for our benefit over the adversary. Some of the individuals that were in there were very much, I am just focused on hard science, hard tech. And, you know, it really kind of it opened their, you know, aperture on what is actually in that environment. So we've been really big about kind of getting those discussions and those key individuals in those discussions to share their information across the space. You know, we're working right now on an influence concept. It's very, very early stages. That's why I didn't mention it on the slides. But that's going to also kind of talk to how we get the civil considerations and use those to build our networks and either counter our adversary's message or, you know, use those local networks to gain a better understanding of our adversaries in the future fight. That's all I have. Back over to you, sir.
Thanks. So next I'm going to go to the joint proponent. Dave, do you have any insight here? Over.
Hey, thanks, Dennis. From our perspective, we've been participating in the Joint Concept for Information Advantage Working Group. And from our standpoint here, through our participation up to this point, it has been very heavily focused on the technical aspects, but we continue to participate in the working group to ensure that at the moments and as the opportunities arise, we ensure that civil affairs equities are integrated into the concept. Over.
Thank you. And Stefan, do you have anything from the NATO CIMIC perspective on supporting information advantage? I'm not sure if that's a term that NATO uses. Over.
Yeah, no deliverables yet. I know that as an outcome of the new strategic concept, NATO warfighting capstone concept, one is cognitive superiority, and that's where we see the one of those warfighting development imperatives where CIMIC has a role to play next to the layered resilience, where we also see a main involvement of CIMIC. But yeah, no deliverables yet, unfortunately. We will have to contribute to that and to stay involved and to fight ourselves in. Over.
Thank you, Stefan. Colonel Sisk.
So much like Dave, you know, we haven't seen the emerging doctrine as of yet. However, we're heavily involved in the IAOPTs, both again to ensure that our equities are being well protected, and also to seek opportunities where we can find them to continue to allow for the growth of the branch. Over.
All right, thank you. And Colonel Liddick, anything from PKSOI? Over.
Yeah, Dennis. From our perspective, and I mean, this is something we're grappling with, of staying abreast of the effort at the joint and specifically the Army service level, and learning from what the Marines, how they have advanced, is ensure that we're accurately capturing and conveying information's role in stabilization activity execution. Over.
Roger, thanks. And actually, Dr. Walsh would like to also weigh in on this from a structure perspective. Over.
Yeah, hey, Dennis, real quick, the Army Division, Corps, and Theater Army levels, they have established that G39 Staff Directorate, and that is the Principal Staff Section for Converging Information Advantage capabilities and activities. So our work with Cyber Center of Excellence, Mission Command Center of Excellence, we're ensuring that the activities that are those true information advantage activities do not conflict with or act in contrary purpose with those civil affairs activities that are conducted, and that we figure out what those processes and procedures are to deconflict and integrate all those information related activities that are being conducted in a division, corps, or theater army's battle space, to make sure that we're providing him with the requisite situational awareness where he can get that decision-making advantage and really truly go after information dominance within the competition continuum. Over.
Thanks, Dale. And speaking of structure also, last week, a couple of representatives, one from Army Cyber Command, and another from the first IO group, came here to Fort Bragg, met some key leaders here, to include Major General Coggins at KPOC, and they were describing an O&O for the Theater Information Advantage element. And one thing that they recognize civil affairs being having an important role in working information advantage at the theater level. And their concept, their idea for building this organizational structure of a theater information advantage element will include organic civil affairs staff as well as PSYOP staff in there to bring in the perspective of activities in the field, from civil affairs units, and integrate them at the theater level. So obviously it's an important element of our future force and future operations that civil affairs will be a big participant in. So I'm going to move on. We have less than 15 minutes. We're going to go ahead and cut off at 12:45 to give everybody an opportunity to take a short break before moving into the next session. But I'm trying to locate my note here. The next question had to do with here we go. With the it's a Marine with the force structure change. What is the Marine CA structure in terms of number of billets, both active and reserve? That comes from Math 13 Mike. And there was a follow-on question, I think, from James Flaherty related. What will the reorganization of the USMC-CA community do to the enlisted force structure in the reserves? And Anthony Curry, does USMC-CA cover their own regions in the world, or do regions that other US military cover, please? So, Mr. Weiss, that's all yours. Over.
So the three questions were force design, regional, and the enlisted elements. The numbers, I apologize, I don't have the numbers right off the top of my head, but with the integration of the PSYOP community in the influence capability area, creating that professionalized force, this will give a primary MOS. At least it creates the necessary promotion pyramid to create a primary MOS on both the officer and the enlisted side for those individuals that make the change over to that community. The one thing that we've been dealing with a lot of the active component is a lot of turnaround. You have someone who is currently a free MOS, and it can be picked by anybody. There is no question or answer or evaluation on those individuals before they come into the community. We've been very fortunate that the vast majority of those people have been incredibly professional and have done great operations. This is going to take that, and we are now going to be able to screen those individuals, and they're going to have to go through the PSYOP. Probably we're not 100% with this, but that the PSYOP requirements that currently the PSYOP community goes through. I'm still very, very nascent stages on what that's actually going to look like. So that's going to give a professional primer MOS. So it's probably sitting at about 300 to 400 individuals on both the O and the E side for the ACT component. Reserve component, it's all still staying the way it is right now. It's 3 civil affairs units. First, third, and fourth CAGs are still going to be around, and they're just going to be recoding from civil affairs billets over to this influence MOS. However, they're still going to maintain the civil affairs billet title, so that there's no issue on when those people forward deploy. Some of the thoughts of maybe they're here to do PSYOP when really they're doing civil affairs. We've reached out to a couple State Department reps on, hey, how would that actually be viewed, to kind of answer a couple of the RFIs that came back from the community. For any of the restructuring we're looking at right now, we're only looking at the officer side of the house, and we haven't kind of looked at any of the enlisted structure, just because there's only a very small amount right now. But once we start getting into, okay, how do we actually implement this new influence MOS, looking at how that's going to fall and where there might be dual capability, can those people do both jobs? Probably not. So we need to make sure that that's right and what right looks like for that section. But we hope to create an opportunity for our staff and COs, so that you are not just a team member. You also get an opportunity to do some planning, maybe even sometime the schoolhouse as an instructor, or even within the headquarters element to kind of use those lessons learned and the skills you learned on forwarding the force as a whole. And then the last question, did I cover all of them? Force structure, size.
Regions?
Regions, thank you. Right now, we're not regionally aligned. Our teams, our civil affairs groups might have a MAR 4 they kind of fall under, or help to provide forces to. But if there is a request for forces and 4th Civil Affairs Group can't do it, maybe 1st Civil Affairs Group can send a team, or even 3rd. We try not to really regionalize our Marines, because you just never know where you might need to be, where you might need to deploy, and how you need to get after it. We do have kind of an unwritten rule in some cases that 4th Civil Affairs Group, which is down in Miami, Florida, if you speak a language that is also spoken in South America, or Central America, or the Caribbean, hey, you're probably going to be somebody that they want on that team, just so that they can use those skill sets. But it's not a requirement. It's just kind of a gentle nod. But because we try to go, from East Coast to West Coast with our Marines, and even to forward deployed in across the globe, trying to make someone who's regionally aligned takes a lot of time and effort, and then that person is kind of only stuck in that one location, at least from our perspective. So being able to take what we already have as a small community, and employ them where the moment needs be, and emphasize how we can use a local State Department approved interpreter in those locations is a great thing. On that other sense, though, when the Marine littoral regiments coming on deck, those are going to be kind of specific to one location, and we'll start doing some long-term engagement in those locations, So we might need to look at, okay, do we need to have some better understanding across our force of these areas that we're operating in? Gaining that knowledge, maybe not language, but at least gaining the who's who in the zoo kind of understanding on who they're going to be operating with, who are the different movers and shakers. And that also goes back to our tool set and being able to share that information or perform some analysis and hand that over with our next team coming in. Back to you, sir.
Anthony, thank you very much. Hey, the next question comes from Nick Crowley regarding taking A-scope PMESI to the next level. And Nick, I think I saw some back and forth in the chat regarding that. And I know Colonel Sisk also mentioned it once or twice. So I'll ask you to go ahead and come back and is there anything else you need to know regarding that particular question or over?
No, it was really just the question captures it, to what extent are we building architecture around a framework that, the folks out there on the investigative side don't particularly like. And as we design information management systems, is there agility built into the system to accommodate changes in how we investigate? Because that's the fundamental issue. You look at something like A-scope and PMESI, and the chat reflected this, that it's really the librarian's mindset, right? We file away little bits of knowledge box by box. That's not what civil reconnaissance is. That's not what CA needs to be doing and investigating, out in the field with more of a detective's mindset. And so, as the force looks at that, our partners looking at that in the UK, Eastern Europe, Middle East, et cetera, there are other ways of digging into this. And are we being mindful of that as we build sort of the systems to manage all this on the back end? Over.
Roger, thanks. Colonel Sisk, did you want to say anything to respond to that?
I would say that I completely agree with you, Nick, which is why CCAS was off ramped to allow for the growth within the Castle framework, to try to get after exactly some of the things that you were describing. We need to be more agile. We need to have rigor behind what we're saying. We need to be able to do more than just bin the data and then rebin it again. We need all those things and more, which is why we're taking this methodical approach, why we're starting from the ground up and not stovepiping it, where all the work is being done in a smoke-filled back room. This is going to be something that's going to be worked across lines of effort, both within the interagency and with our joint counterparts. And we're again hoping to make that linkage with our NATO allies within the next month or so. Over.
Mr. Weiss, anything from the Marine Corps regarding A-scope PMESI? Over.
So we still see it as as a baseline requirement to teach our planners or any of our CA teams on, hey, this is just a way of aggregating the information in a quick and easy manner. But like you said, it is just a tool set. It's no different from why it's important to do your PME. You get that baseline, but what really matters in there is actually the key elements. But we're also telling these individuals, if you find something that it fits better for you to kind of aggregate the information and perform your analysis you need to perform, then hey, by all means, use that tool set. But the way our systems are built, that is more looking at a PMESI A scope item, because as was previous said, if we're sharing that information with, let's say, our commander's brief at the end of the day, or going into an operation, a lot of people speak PMESI A scope and understand how that stuff is there. So we kind of have to work within the system that other people understand, and it's one good way of giving an overlay sometimes to a commander. But equally, when you start doing the analysis, if you need something else, hey, use something else. just give us, you know, a good product at the end. Over.
Nick, any follow-up, or we're good?
No, I just wanted to put it out there. I appreciate the time for everyone.
No, and I appreciate the question, because it's an important one, and one that is confusing to a lot of folks. And with that, I guess I'm going to have to go ahead and leave it there. We're at 12:45, and I just want to once again thank the CA Association for giving us the opportunity to present an update on what each of the proponents have been doing. And I'd like to thank each of the proponent representatives for their briefings and their responses to all the questions. I think this was probably the one of the most informative sessions in this particular panel that I've seen in the last few iterations. So look forward to us doing it again the next time. And so I'll turn it back to John McGilligan or whoever is taking us into the break. Over.
Thank you, sir, and thank you to all our speakers. Take a short break, and a quick reminder that the workshops 2 and 3 will be in a different Zoom link. It's something we put in the chat, but also any registrant for today's CA Symposium should have that link in their emails that were sent out. So thank you for your time, and we'll reconnect in about 15 minutes. Out here.